From the moment of first sentience it begins. The attitudes, ideas, habits, and expectations that will guide and drive forward a life, creating sometimes a desire to change the world, and sometimes a desire to understand the world as it was, is, and will be. The balance of these two efforts has, with dangerous effect, been driven far more by the former, often without benefit of the latter. Understanding has been my effort. These readings are from nearly 30 years of essay writing and a lifetime of wondering about and study of how we, the human animal, lives in the world. The reading introduction explains more fully. I am here called James Keye, a comfortable pseudonym. I've been trying to make sense of the confusions that we live with since I was a child. I wondered about why so much of what I observed and experienced seemed not right, just not the way for the world to make sense. This wasn't a passing thought, but became, early on, 11 to 13 years old, a centerpiece of my young self, the flavoring for everything. I wanted to try to find out why we had gone what seemed to me so very wrong, and then what might be right. Although I didn't realize that's what I was doing at the time, I just knew that I had to look beyond the stories, the certainties, the expectations, and the habits of the people around me. About this time, I discovered fossils. The first rocks I found that seemed to have once been alive, I was certain were dinosaur bones. But I soon learned that there were no dinosaur fossils where I lived. I had found some algae that made columns of calcium carbonate rock. With a little study and a lot of walking around looking, an abundance of fossil shark's teeth and alligator scutes gave way to million-year-old horse's teeth and bones, and then mammoths and mastodons, camelids, tapirs, rhinoceroses, giant beavers, and small whales began to populate both my fossil collection and my imagination. While it was only vaguely apparent to me at first, there was the growing revelation that humans must have also left a bone trail, took my young mind by storm, and was to inform the rest of my life in completely unpredictable ways. From this beginning, we leap to the present. Years ago, I tried to find people and their writings saying the things that I believed most needed to be said about the substantive issues of this time: population, consumption, nature of human economics, our biological nature, and how our detailed issues of war, injustice, inequity, environmental damage, all are integrated into the history of the human animal, and our special adaptations that both drive our possibilities and our destructiveness. So many things taken as givens, as unquestioned realities, just seemed wrong. Had since I was a child. And the list had only grown longer and more sophisticated with time. I was looking for tree blazes in the confusing forest of my fellow humans. It seemed that there were only a very few truly trying to lay bare a path through the tangle. So many, it seemed, taking the tangle for granted. So I decided to try to write my own thoughts, to pay attention, to feel my way and mark a way along when it seemed appropriate. But mostly I wrote to clarify my own thinking, since no one was going to do it for me. If no one was going to make sense of the world, then I would have to try to do it for myself. And by writing as if it was for others to read, there was greater reason to be informed and thoughtful, always a help when one is trying to discover what is true. Long a journal keeper, I began writing these essays about 30 years ago, moved by current events, my experiences with traveling, politics, economics, religions, all tied together by wanting to understand how we human animals operate as part of the life-creating and supporting systems of the planet. I have no special talent that should recommend me to be listened to. It is just that I have taken these things seriously and given these questions considerable effort and thought. Though I've been to school, both as student and teacher, it hardly matters. Unless what I've written and said is compelling and of interest, it should be given no notice. I would hate to think that an opinion of mine needed crutches of title to stand up. A great weakness of the human intellectual process is the reliance on authority. Ideas are given greater value when identified with a person who can claim intellectual heft. Such claiming has become a sort of cottage industry. Of course, honest authority can be a useful tool at certain stages of an investigation, if wisely used. But authority alone is a very blunt instrument in the pursuit of veridical understanding. I realize that the first criterion for even being listened to is that one has some strength of experience. But it is perhaps even more important these days, and this is essential, that a reader be willing to give a sufficient effort to understanding. I can present no evidence of authority that would cause bad ideas to be considered good. The ideas must stand on their own merit. The reader should evaluate them against their own experience and study rather than against my putative experience, and be willing to increase their experience as need be. What I will say is that after a short academic career, I decided to fling my young life from the safe shores of academe out onto the not-so-tender mercies of the fast-flowing world. What are these essays about? They are not the informed work of a specialist or the committed positions of an ideologue. I've simply wanted to understand the world that we live in, its physical origins and true nature, the ways of living things, and the place of the human animal in the whole mix, from the particles of atomic structure to the grand arrangement of galaxies, and that interesting conundrum that only the human animal concerns itself with these things. Too much, you might say. Well, okay, too much. But it is what it is. I will be presenting thoughts from a lifetime and decades of essays, pondering the various ways that we have divided up what is really a singular world process of population and technological growth dominating the Earth's surface. Economics, politics, religion, liberal arts, science, technology, media, entertainment, social norms, so often acted on as separate, are really all the integrated, interacting parts of a social physiology. These are like the blood chemistry, liver function, and brain activity of the social body. These parts cannot be separated from the whole. That they all have their own languages only obscures their interrelatedness. There is something preposterous that these essays and their reading here are about so many subjects for which I have no formal expertise. But what is perhaps even more preposterous is that people must have some reasonable understanding of these things to be a properly informed and responsible actor in today's world. These readings are one person's attempt to make sense of and understand the world of way too much. On the one hand, it amazes me that anyone would be interested in these thoughts and ideas. And on the other, it amazes me that everyone isn't deeply and passionately interested in the most fundamental nature of the life evolved and created as human.